My name's Elena Schlossberg, and I live in Haymarket, Virginia. And this is my home for the last 23 years. I'm a Virginia native, went through the public school system here in Northern Virginia, attended undergraduate and graduate at Marymount University, also in Virginia. I raised a family here, so clearly I love Virginia. So in 2014, I knew that a transmission line had been proposed to go through the town of Haymarket. Having been involved in a transmission line fight, there it's really hopeless. I mean, Dominion is one of the most powerful monopoly utilities in the country. A friend of mine, who is now supervisor for the Gainesville district, called me and he's like, Elena, you need to open up the Little Bull Run Observer, which is our little paper that shows up in your mailbox. Like that's how small town Haymarket still is. And the route was a land use issue that impacted me personally. I went, oh, well, this feels different. The thought of a transmission line coming through your property is a personal threat, not an existential threat. Shortly thereafter, it was disclosed it was for this secretive Amazon Web Services campus. And then I realized this was really not a fight. Yes, it was a fight about a transmission line, but it was a fight about something much bigger. It was a fight about a monopoly utility partnering with what appeared to be a customer that required more power than anybody had ever envisioned. It was unbelievable to imagine that one project could require a transmission line in and of itself that cost tens of millions of dollars and that we all paid for. So, having been involved in a previous transmission line fight with Dominion, what I learned was that it is not always the cheapest route and shortest route. It is the route they believe will be the route of least resistance, even if it costs more. Dominion would be an eminent domain if you're not willing to negotiate whatever cheap price they're willing to throw at you, would seize your property. And forever and a day, you can't plant on it, you can't put a shed on it. That property has now been subsumed. And the other thing is that now that they have this one transmission line, they can add another transmission line without asking at all. So now you've opened yourself up to more industrialization on your own property for one private customer, which should blow everybody's mind. Amazon never admitted it. And that is how data centers, for the most part, like Amazon, still operate. They either work under a subsidiary, then it was VA Data, but VA Data was wholly owned by Amazon. So I don't know exactly what they were hiding. The NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, are prolific. I've never seen anything like it. The data center industry comes in very early. They get your local body, your elected body, planning staff. Why is planning staff signing non-disclosure agreements? So everybody signs these NDAs. I mean, in the Amazon fight, they couldn't even say the word Amazon. You also can't get to how much water, how much power? Why are their power purchase agreements protected when we are providing the transmission, when we, the ratepayers, are covering the cost of their transmission? Ultimately, 5 years later, we forced Dominion to settle on the route. We didn't succeed in this line extension policy to assign to data centers, even though very strongly we knew then if they had to pay for their own infrastructure, you would not see this proliferation today. Then the data center industry was exploding. The data center industry gets a bulk load discount, which we don't know what it is. They get tax incentives, they get discounts. You'll hear Dominion say, well, they're paying for their electricity. Well, they are. We all are. What they are not paying for in a way that is fair, given that they trigger the transmission line infrastructure, which are these massive 230 kilovolt transmission lines. They're 110-foot tall power towers. They have these long arms. They require this huge amount of space forever denuded. So they also have an environmental impact. Now we're going to start talking about generation. This was an extension cord to the Amazon Web Services campus. You plug your extension cord into the wall and you expect energy, right? You expect electricity. Now we're getting to the point where you're plugging it into the wall and there's not enough electricity. This industry is also triggering what will be new generation. Joe Schmo in his, apartment, if he's a Dominion Energy ratepayer, is paying for that transmission line infrastructure, which is why we advocated for this novel way to apply this rate structure to these kinds of transmission extension cords triggered by data centers. And we lost. That line, the hybrid route that I'm talking about, was close to $200 million. And so that is socialized among all the ratepayers. Large customers need to be forced to put some, I quote, skin in the game, or else the burden for this unneeded infrastructure is placed on everybody else, which is patently unfair. So the reason why Virginia is so popular is because our power is so cheap. Well, it's only cheap because we, as ratepayers, are paying for their business model, which is what they are still fighting. Now the cost isn't just socialized in Virginia, it'll be socialized across the nation if the DOE is successful in building 200 new nuclear power plants, which is what they're predicting for the data center industry. Is this AI arms race real? I mean, you look at how many data centers China has in comparison to the United States of America, they don't hold a candle. Let me tell you what national security risk is. The national security risk is affordable, reliable power, water, it is clean air. These are the risks. Why are we making it's almost like these tech bros have infiltrated. I mean, you've got Sam Altman bragging about the size of his 5 gigawatt data center campus. How are you going to power that, Sam? Who's really being crushed under the burden of all this exciting AI? We are running literally out of power and now pulling from other places like Ohio and West Virginia. We used to export power. Now all we're doing is we're importing. As Virginia is subsumed by all the impacts of data center development, you see, like, any good plague or cancer, it's metastasizing. So the data center industry is now going into other places and taking this same model. My hope is that enough people will be impacted that they will realize that this industry is a parasite. We are the host that they are sucking dry. Our elected leaders need to step in and start protecting civilized society. I cannot express enough that we are competing for these critical resources. Right now, the AI model is not profitable. Right now, the money is coming from investors. They don't really have a product that people are willing to pay for in the way that's going to make up for the trillions that is going to be required if they have to start paying for their own transmission, their own generation. Georgia just brought online 2 nuclear power plants. It cost them $33 billion, which, by the way, they're running out of power. Why? Because now they're experiencing all this data center development. This is a political decision, by the way. This is always going to be solved in the political arena. If you want to get elected, you better be on the right side of this issue. It's motivating people to turn out in big numbers. That's the critical mass we are building. That's the place where you're going to see the solution come to light, which is no more freebies, no more foisting your energy needs on regular ratepayers, no more subsidizing, no more corporate welfare. And I use that terminology, but it's really, I can't think of a more appropriate example than having all of us cover the costs for your power. Yeah, the data centers have a ton of money and they can throw that around. What they can't do is vote. They literally cannot vote.